Like we want to work on our emissions. Can you come and test that and tune our burners for us? Like, absolutely. And then, oh, wow, you guys can automate it. Like we're having a really hard time finding folks to like watch this heater at all times to make sure that our end product that we're manufacturing is perfect. So your software can automate that. Wonderful. And so I think through that, each situation may not be technically, recurring with a long-term contract, but because you're taking care of the customer and meeting them where they're at with their need, it's recurring because you've got a customer that wants to use you for all of the different elements of your business.
I'm your host, Nick McLean, and this is Ambition. They say an overnight business success takes 10 years to achieve. But what's the timeline for putting a new shine on a company that's over a century old? When you buy a legacy business, you're basically an upstart who must delve into a history of success, failure, and everything in between. Part of your diagnostic will be to look into the decades of relentless hard work, unwavering dedication, and unshakable resilience that laid the foundation for an enterprise with true staying power. But what happens after that? Should you just make minor adjustments to the business model or reinvent the proverbial wheel? I remember my own story with Four Pillars was that after we made one or two acquisitions, I thought that we would just be able to take off in terms of the pace of acquisitions we could make. Turns out, though, that it is hard to get deals done, whether you've done 1, 2, or 20. Our guest today is an old friend, John Lippe, a thoughtful business leader whom I've known for quite some time. Just 5 years ago, John took on the challenge of acquiring just such a business, which he's been revamping to give a new lease on life. The name of John's company is Federal Corporation, which encompasses a wholly owned subsidiary, Federal Services. Federal Corporation's origins go all the way back to the beginning of the 20th century, making it over 100 years old. Since its founding in 1918, Federal has been a leading provider of thermal solutions in the American Midwest. Their expertise spans emissions, efficiency, safety, and reliability solutions, backed by a century of technical knowledge and commitment to solving complex challenges. John says Federal is not the kind of company that delivers a crucial part and then you never hear from them again. Much of the value they provide includes customer-centric service. I like that phrase there, not just customer service, but customer-centric service. That's just one of the aspects of the enterprise that he's considered in charting a new course for Federal, which he hopes will be around for another 100 years, maybe long after John is gone. In this episode, we'll dive into the critical role of work culture at a long legacy enterprise like John's. Hear about the strategies he employs to create value within his company, from encouraging input from his people to building meaningful connections with customers. John Lippe is focused on cultivating satisfaction on all fronts. One thing he's certain of is things happen on their own timeline, not his or anyone else's. All right, John, from your perspective, you might consider this lucky or unlucky, but we have known each other for a period of time. I know why I think listeners should want to hear your story, but I'd like to hear it from you. Why do you think listeners should care about your story and try to learn from some of the challenges that you've faced and have overcome?
Yeah, absolutely. Why should people care? I would say definitely want it to pass along all of the mistakes I've made. So they're probably still going to make them, but maybe they won't make them for as long or for as painful. That you learn a lot. I've learned so much from podcasts, so much from you. And it's funny, you pick up those themes, but until you actually face that issue yourself, it's hard to really understand what that person was talking about. So I'll do my best.
No, that's great. Let's go down that thread a little bit. What is an example of a challenge that you heard about or that you thought you might face, but once you actually did face it, it was a lot different than what you had expected?
Oh, for sure. And so I've been with this company that I acquired about 5 years ago. And like the biggest learning, one of my first mentors, best mentors I ever had, Bill Kurtz, said, hey, if you want to do anything fast, don't do it in business, go cut your grass. Everything in business takes a long time. And I, am very entrepreneurial, very excited, just want to move forward. I already see the vision of where the company's going. And it just takes a long time. So I think I've heard patience from my mentors again and again. And it's taken me making the mistake of trying to go too fast and having to go back and do it over again. multiple times to really let that settle in more.
I completely agree. I have learned that lesson so much, and whenever I'm talking to aspiring business owners or aspiring professionals, it's often a message that I share, because a lot of times you're talking to folks that are really they've gotten to where they are because they've had a healthy level of impatience. Sometimes it's overly, it's not healthy. We're just trying to be nice in that categorization. But in what we're doing, which is trying to grow a business, sometimes you just have to be patient. Earlier on, when you were still learning that message, did you think that it might be that you were doing something wrong? Or did you have confidence that you were doing it right? It just wasn't happening as quickly as you thought it should.
Yeah, I love that framing. I definitely have had, I think, on this theme of patience and the feelings I had while going through it, I definitely had a lot of insecurities, which would go with the feeling like I'm doing it wrong, or why am I not being effective as a leader, as an owner, what have you. Because I had managed some folks before I went and acquired this company, but it was only a couple of years. So I'm still pretty junior in my like leadership development, and I had a lot of insecurity with that. But and I think to your point earlier, like it drives us, but it can also be like our greatest strength can also be our greatest weakness, and we're so used to like winning and doing things right, and so when we get a little hiccup, how do we respond, and not letting that take us too far down. Because at least in my case, like I want to own and grow my company. We're 107 years old. I want to grow it for another 100 years. Continue to pass it down. So it's a really, really long time frame. And whenever I'd kind of step back and be like, no, we're here for the long game. We want to do things right so it sticks forever. That really helped change my perspective.
I can see how it would. So many times you hear folks talk about people that are trying to buy a business, and they're just negative because they think that all they're going to do is come in for a few years and try and sell it. So it's refreshing to hear that you're not just thinking about 5 years, you're thinking about 100 years.
For sure. I think, it's really hard. I'm not sure how much of your audience is kind of the search fund entrepreneurship through acquisition, but that's the approach I took. And whenever you're looking at it in a financial model, it looks so easy. Just go in, make a few margin improvements, bring in a good leadership team. But in the day to day, like, you have this one person that you put your heart and soul into, and then they quit without notice. You're like, oh, so you have to have that why of what really gets you going. And for me, autonomy was a big driver. Like I really wanted to be in the driver's seat of my own destiny. And then like making something special. And with all of the, I have almost 50 employees here now, and I really want something special for them that they're excited about, because of the previous companies I've been at where I didn't feel that way. I think we've attracted a lot of folks that have that similar viewpoint.
I've talked with numerous business owners that have achieved some level of scale in their business, and I would say that two recurring themes are that they chose to focus on a particular niche as opposed to being everything to everyone. And also that a key driver in their success was having an actual culture. I'm not saying there's a right one or a wrong one, but having a culture that the team identified with. How would you assess your company's progress, or how would you assess your company as it relates to the idea that you are more niche as opposed to more general, and that you have tried to at least establish a strong culture for the company?
Yeah, absolutely. I think sequentially I'll address the culture first and then move into the niche, because whenever I came in, I came across this company pretty early on in my search. I was still learning how to acquire a business, let alone run one. But the one thing, it was 102 years old at the time when I acquired it. I really wanted to maintain that culture. That was important to the owner that passed it along to me, Alan Leffler, who's just my mentor, my spiritual leader, just an amazing man. And just getting to know him, his integrity gave me a lot of confidence in that transition. And so I didn't want to lose that. And so one of the first things I did is I used EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System, to go in. It's a great change management process. Highly recommend it to anyone that's coming into a company that had been going for a while without them, to really help communicate and drive change. But one of the early things I did is we went around and I interviewed all of the rock stars of the company, not just everyone, but like the ones that whenever you talk to other folks here, we had about 35 employees at the time, who really makes this place tick. And then interviewing them, it helped me build a list, I think, of 4 core values at the time. And those core values we've continued to refine over the years, but that was a great setting. So that way, whenever we were making difficult changes, we were explaining to folks why it's important. Like, hey, it's not, COVID hit a couple weeks after I bought the company.
Oh, good timing.
We had to make perfect timing. Hey, it's a good old boring business for a reason. I love it. But we had to make really tough calls. And one of the big messages I had is, hey, there's going to be winners and losers after COVID. It's not the oldest company that's going to be here. It's going to be the one that continues to evolve to serve our customers. And so continuous improvement was a really important core value for us. And because of that, like, it attracted some folks that had been here and like had been wanting to grow and weren't getting that growth, but others it might have repel. And so I think that's so important to get that foundation as early as possible so you can attract all the right people to you and build that trust. And then with that, it gives you a great platform to figure out what that niche is. So happy to address that second part now.
So how about you talk about your business for the listeners? You talk about what it did prior to your involvement, how it's changed since you took over ownership, and what your approach is towards additional product or service offerings, how you think about new channels or markets or whatever.
For sure. So Federal Corporation had been around for 102 years before I acquired it. It had been in the same family for 4 generations. And so, with that comes a lot of great things, like a lot of customers in the Oklahoma area had heard of us, at least in Oklahoma City. But it also comes with, hey, this is the way we've always done it. And the previous owner, he had taken over whenever his son had unfortunately passed away untimely. And so he was trying to continue to shepherd it. But, he was in his golden years. Like, he's now, busier than he ever was here with his church, with his sailing club, his yacht club. So it was kind of more in that, what are we trying to do phase. And so when I came in and brought in, I tried to keep all the great parts of the culture, call it like One Federal, like how we look out for one another, serve our customers, but bring in a little bit more of that innovation, that drive, continuous improvement. Which I think was like critical to our early phases and attracting folks that wanted to be here for that. Through that time, I was just I was new to this industry. Although I'm a mechanical engineer as my background, I barely knew how a boiler worked. The heating, we're a thermal solutions company. So whether it be like boilers, pumps, kind of wet heat related things behind the scenes in the commercial space. But we also had a software development team that would do what's known as burner management systems in the industrial sector. And so it was a pretty wide range, and it was a lot for me to take on all at one time. And I was scared to be like, okay, we're just going to focus on this division, because then I, cut out other components. And so what I tried to spend in my early phases was just getting to know how each team worked. So we've got our distribution business, which is like a specialized Home Depot. We've got our equipment business, a rep business. We're the only ones that can sell certain equipment like lock and bar, Taco pumps in our territory. So think of that like a Toyota dealership, the only ones that can sell new types of Toyotas in that area. And then we had like our services / automation projects. And each of them were very different, but also rhymed. Like, there was a reason that they all came together. So I was nervous to go all in on one too early. And so I spent a lot of time just riding with the sales team, talking with the customers. And then I started to see the synergy between them. Like, whenever you sell that large piece of equipment, then you need all the parts and pieces and the technical support to be able to make sure that it continues running for years to come. So what I ended up finding after a couple of years, the unifying theme was combustion or heating related, and just being on the cutting edge of that. So within the commercial space, like, we're selling like really, really high efficiency boilers so that we're meeting climate change goals, and then our fuel consumption goals. And then on the industrial space, like, we're automating a lot of this stuff for very similar reasons. And so you can bring someone in and really give them a good foundation in the commercial space, and then continue to nurture and grow them so they can continue to grow in their career doing industrial software development.
Very interesting. I'd like to go back to the process that you identified for 4 core values, and maybe one or two angles there. First off, I think that there are probably a subset of listeners that feel like haven't actually sat in the position of CEO or president, and feel like as CEO or president, you have all this control in order to, not necessarily impart your own will, but at least to make change where you see fit. As it relates to those four core values, I'd like to hear about the process. I know you talk to your employees, but a little bit more of how you settled on those four core values. Because knowing you, I'm sure that those four core values, if you could pick any four out of a hat, they might not be the four that you actually settled on. But again, knowing you, I have the feeling that you didn't put what you wanted as most important. You made what was important to the team most important, and that's how you settled on those four core values. So, would you mind talking through that just a little bit more?
Absolutely. So whenever I brought it up earlier, I talked about how I went through and interviewed all the different employees. I'll use our first core value. We sell solutions. We make our customers look good. It's kind of like the mantra that goes along with it. And it was really important to our employees that, hey, we, like in the rep business, we don't actually manufacture this equipment. Like they're just coming to us because of our expertise, because of our responsiveness, our technical support. And so if we're not going above and beyond for them, they can very easily go somewhere else. That rep contract's 30 days and out. So that manufacturer can be like, hey, they're not taking care of the end users in that state. Let's get rid of them. And we've had a lot of changes like that because of COVID and because of a lot of consolidation that's going on in our market. So we really have to stay on our toes with that. And I think talking with the employees, and then I would really try to reinforce it through examples. So each week we'd have we call an L10 meeting in EOS, but it's like, hey, what's going on? What problems we have and how do we solve it? And then we would always kick it off with kudos. So who got the We Sell Solutions kudos this week? And it would be like, a counter salesman that came in at 1 a.m. because a hospital went down, and we really got to make sure that hospital stays up to take care of those patients. And they needed like a steam valve or something that we had in stock. So their, maintenance shop could come to us and we could take care of them. One that really hit me personally is the servant way core value. So that's no one is harmed on our watch. So think about like this equipment that we're putting into a hospital. Like what if, and this happened to me firsthand at Mercy right down the road, my wife had an emergency C-section for her first child. And we depended on the clean steam generator in that building to clean the utensils to make sure that surgery went well. So I was like, firsthand, we had installed that generator there, and I really wanted to make sure it was working. I think stories like that people really connect with, and it helps reinforce, day in and day out why those core values matter.
I've talked to different types of business owners. Sometimes there have been, I've talked to nonprofits as well as organizations that have religion as part of their core value. And you can make an argument that those can kind of be easier to establish a common culture because the employees identify with the religion, or they identify with the cause that you're going after. Also, as it relates to your business, you're part of what you're doing is not necessarily saving lives, but you're making sure that your equipment is not causing any harm, as you just mentioned. What about like a marketing firm? Do you feel like you have an easier job establishing a culture because you have that tie to keeping people safe? Whereas maybe a B2B services firm, it's harder to make that case?
I thought a lot about this because whenever I was looking to acquire a company, I reached out to tens of thousands of companies in the state of Oklahoma. I had a couple hundred that I looked at closely, made 80 initial offers. So I mean, my whole goal is to get back home closer to my family. And so a lot of it was like, well, what type of business do I want? Because I want something that's mission oriented that I can get behind and get excited about. And the more I looked at them, I mean, I think any business that is making a profit must be creating value somewhere in the world for their customers, or why would they buy from them? I mean, these are smaller companies. They're not like a big monopoly. It's like, hey, you have to buy from me. And so in my mind, like any company that has, a value driver or something that differentiates them that the customers appreciate. So maybe with the marketing, maybe they're targeting, a specific type of customer that maybe they target nonprofits, and those nonprofits are helping a lot of people. So the more effective they're making those nonprofits, the more folks that they're helping in the end.
No, I appreciate that. I remember whenever I was in grad school, a lot of folks were in the marketing program, and earlier on in their studies, they would be talking about what brands they wanted to work on. And then you would hear from some of the graduates that would come back to campus, and what they would tell them is it doesn't really matter what brand that you're working on, because at the end of the day, you're working with a team trying to achieve success, and the individual brand that you're working on isn't important as long as you're working with your team, your team is achieving success, which correlates to success for the brand, which I think is a very strong correlation to the concept that you just explained there.
For sure. I think there's so many different ways to get fulfillment and to make a difference in the world, and business can be an amazing vehicle to do so. Like you get to build an amazing team that gets that sense of belonging and community, and you get to make an impact on the world through your customers or even through your vendors. We call it the federal family community, like one federal. So we have like big open houses where we invite all of our. We have a couple hundred customers that come in. We get to serve them all hamburgers. It's really neat. It's something that I think you could create with just about any company, but you have to be really intentional about it.
Switching gears a little bit, I want to talk about pricing. My experience is that a lot of companies in the lower middle market and smaller, they can benefit from basic business fundamentals in a lot of different areas. However, if I were to pick one specific area in which they perhaps have the least sophistication, that would be sales and marketing in general and pricing in particular. So often for these small companies, I see pricing models that are a cost plus pricing model, which, as you probably would agree, doesn't always accurately reflect the value for that product or service. Would you talk to me a little bit about the pricing strategy at Federal, how you've tried to change that, or maybe it was great and you've just continued the practice, but could you talk about pricing strategy for me?
Absolutely. And you're spot on. Like that's whenever you go to the business school, they teach you all about the willingness to pay versus the cost plus, like what's the value you're generating. But it's hard for that to really translate to the folks that are doing the pricing unless you really change the culture and the mindset about pricing. I think before I had come, it was just kind of like, oh, this is how we've always priced it. It wasn't very, intentional possibly on why one, situation had this price versus another. And so I began with education. So I'd spent time with our employees at like our all hands meetings. We put in a profit sharing program and first just explained how like the very, very basic P&L works and why, even just increasing the price $1 contributes more, not only to our profit pool, but more money for us to invest in training, resources, value added distribution capabilities, all this fun stuff that we wanted to do. And, some were like, oh, I got to protect my customer. Like I want to make sure that they get the cheapest price possible. It's like, yes, but maybe that's not the most important thing to the customer. Maybe like if we had that extra dollar to get that to them a day faster, like that would be worth it to them. So instead of thinking about pricing as, hey, we're screwing the customer over, think of it more as like, what's the value that we're providing in this situation? And what does the customer truly want? Like, would they rather pay less and have someone that has no technical expertise or training? Or would they rather pay a little bit more and know that they're going to get the right thing the first time? Because a lot of times our customers, are mechanical contractors, and the parts, a small part of the job, when their overall cost, a lot of it could be the labor. And so if they end up getting the wrong part because the supply house isn't knowledgeable on what they're selling to them, it could cost them multiple days, which would be a heck of a lot more than a couple $100s for a part.
Oh, I think that's a great example. And I think you really did a good job of communicating that to your team, because that comment that one of your employees made resonates because I see how they want to protect their customer. Sometimes at home, I'll do things for my wife and I'll think, oh, she's going to be really happy about this. And she's like, why did you do that? And I can tell she's not happy at all that I did that. I'll offer that story because so often, not only at home, but also in business, we do things that we think our customers will value, even though those are things that we would value individually or our company would value. And we haven't taken the time to get to know what the customer actually values in that relationship. That's why I think the conversation that you had with your employee is so great, because you set the stage, or you plant the seed that the first step in understanding what is important to the customer is thinking about the issue from their perspective. And perhaps I might challenge you to maybe say that the next step will be to start talking to your customer and asking them what is actually important, what service or products can they provide in order to be more valuable to them.
Absolutely. I think that's spot on. Like in my mind, a lot of these supply houses are going to go, the way it's all going to end up going to Amazon. So like, how are we going to differentiate? How can we use our technical expertise, training opportunities, value added, distribution where we customize the equipment, fabricate it for the customer? Because otherwise we're going to get left behind.
And I know that Amazon probably delivers next day or the day after, but they're not showing up at 1 a.m. in the middle of the night to that part, are they?
That's right. That's right.
I'd like to switch gears a little bit to the software side of the business. Everybody talks about recurring revenue businesses and how amazing they are. When you think about your business, of course, you like the recurring revenue nature as well. I mean, who doesn't? But when you think about which segment of the business that you're trying to grow the most, is it really is really what you're only looking at is the cohesiveness of providing the thermal solution to your customer? Do you balance that with the desire for more recurring revenue type business? How do you solve that? Because that would be a challenge for me personally, knowing that it's sure nice to have that check come in every month on the same day, as opposed to waiting for whenever your customers need products and whatnot.
Absolutely. And to throw one more complexity into that question, in some, like in the commercial space, our service business that we primarily target industrial would actually compete with some of our great customers. So not only are you thinking about your customer, but you're also thinking about kind of the middlemen customers as well, and making sure that you don't want to, hey, I'm going to get the service contract that's recurring, but it's going to piss off my top mechanical contractor that buys a couple million of GP from me each year. So you're constantly like weighing, okay, what's the best for this situation? Because our contractors still want us to have that technical support, but they don't, want us to be jumping in front of them doing those service contracts. So
that is
a lot of things.
Yeah, that is more complex. So thanks for letting me know how much more complex it was.
Yeah, and I think you see that in any business. There's always, your go-to-market strategy could be through like a wholesaler. Like there's a lot of things where you just have to be careful, and you can differentiate and protect those important partners of yours through pricing. Contractors get this price if they're at a certain volume, end users get this price. So, and they can, mark you up and use you. So there's a lot of ways to do it. But I think to answer your question directly on how do you balance like what type of offering you provide to the customer, I think customers are, even in the B2B old school industrial space, are getting pretty wise on getting stuck in recurring software contracts that drive them nuts and that aren't really meeting their needs. So we do our best to just figure out what is it in the situation that's really bugging them, and then knowing that if we really take a good care of them with that, they're going to come back to us for the other items. So like in an industrial plant, a lot of them, even if they're down for an hour, it can be a couple $100,000. So maybe in that situation, I just need this part ASAP. So we'll like zip it up to them. But then they're like, oh, wow, you guys have combustion technicians? Like, can you help us? Like, we want to work on our emissions. Can you come and test that and tune our burners for us? They're like, absolutely. And then, oh, wow, you guys can automate it? Like, we're having a really hard time finding folks to like watch this heater at all times to make sure that our end product that we're manufacturing is perfect. So your software can automate that? Wonderful. And so I think through that, each situation may not be technically, recurring with a long-term contract, but because you're taking care of the customer and meeting them where they're at with their need, it's recurring because you got a customer that wants to use you for all of the different elements of your business.
Oh, and the stickiness is just increases so much. It's going to be much harder for them to find another vendor or supplier that can provide that suite of services and products that you do.
Absolutely. And it helps. I think going back to our pricing, like what is it that the customer truly values? So maybe we get in there, we do our automation software and they love it, but hey, we want to be warned if the system's going to go out. So one of the things that's in R&D right now with us is remote monitoring. How can we monitor from our office what's going on in their plant and give them a call, a heads up before things start going, awry?
Oh my gosh. I'm sure the customers would pay a lot for that. We're not just
we'll find out.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we're such critical issues. I mean, if the boiler goes down or whatever, that's immediate impacts that you're feeling. I think there are different challenges. I'm not going to say they're easier or harder that a person that started their own business and has grown it over 5 or 10 years or however long that might be, as compared to somebody like yourself that comes in fresh. I think looking at it from the founder's perspective, they might say, well, it's easy because you came in with an outside perspective, you didn't know how things were done, and you can apply this fresh set of eyes to a problem that I can't because I set everything up myself, because in the early days it was only me. Do you have any advice or counsel to folks that have been in their business for a long time that would like to try to see their business with a fresh set of eyes, but it's challenging for them because they're the founder and the systems they created are their own devices and their own creations, if you will?
Absolutely. Yeah. When you were setting that up, I had a lot of different thoughts that came to my mind. I think buying a business that's been going for a while has a lot of pros and cons. You're coming with a lot of bad habits, but you're also coming with a great customer base. At my company, we didn't have Wi-Fi, no one had laptops, and COVID hit a couple weeks in. Like that, we had to make some pretty drastic cultural changes quickly just to make sure that we could keep things moving along. But for someone that's been in their business for a while and they don't know what they don't know, like I call it, I love whenever we have a new employee join that's come from like a similar type business or even a different business, but has some neat experience. And I always ask them like over and over again in their first 30 days, like, what do you see here that's different at your other company? Like, what are we doing that we don't understand? Like, what's the magnet on the refrigerator that's been sitting there for years that we don't even know about? And so I think that continuous improvement core value that we have, progress, not perfection, like is a big driver. And then the way that I learn is through connecting with others and curiosity. So I built a bunch of peer groups. Some are industry specific. Some are just like really neat people that I admire and learn a lot from. And I love just spitballing with them ideas or, issues I'm having. And a lot of their solutions, even though they're in a different market, can apply. And so that's been a great way to get outside the box too.
I don't think everybody's going to go to or have the willingness or comfort to establish a peer group. But as it relates to asking new employees what you do differently, my immediate reaction was, I mean, I didn't come up with it, but it's an obvious, like who wouldn't want to do that? But also that I don't know that a lot of people would actually do it. They probably wouldn't think about it because just think how busy you are. Think about the guy that came in at 1:00. The next morning, you're not thinking about talking to the new employee. You're thinking about congratulating the guy for serving your customer. And so I think that that's a great example or a great demonstration of your leadership, that you have this idea that perhaps people won't say is the most amazing idea ever. Who cares about that? You followed through on it. Whereas maybe 90%, maybe not 90%, but maybe a lot of other people, myself included, probably wouldn't have followed through on that, even though we feel like we should have.
Absolutely. I think for us, it's like our be open and honest core value. Like I think one of the most foreign things for new employees that come to our company is we really want to hear their voice. Like we have these weekly problem solving L10s, and like even the new folks will have, maybe some of their ideas aren't great because they don't really understand all the history, but it'll lift our head up to solutions that we never even thought of before. And so getting them and encouraging them to have the confidence to speak up takes a while, but you praise them when they do, even whenever maybe their idea doesn't make a ton of sense, but they start to learn because they bring those ideas up.
You just hear so many people bemoan the fact that they work in large companies and they are just a number, not a person. What a breath of fresh air to come into a new company and not just one person, but the whole team encourages them to speak up and say, we want to hear your opinions and your thoughts or whatnot. Man, I just feel like that is such a stark comparison to typical corporate America and would have to be so refreshing to most people. I mean, there are some people that like the corporate world because they could just, float underneath the radar and just, clock in and clock out and nobody cares what they do. But to the people that want a little bit more, it has to be a really strong element of your culture, I would say.
Yeah, it's definitely foreign to many folks that come in. It takes a little time, but once they do, they're like, this is great. Like, because we love it. Like that's how we're going to get better. And that's the type of people we want to attract, the hungry, humble, and smart folks.
It's interesting. In one of our companies, I'll not share which, to protect the innocent. The silo that this person had built around himself was so thick, just did not want to share any information. And it was a continual challenge to try to bring in new people with different ideas because this person always felt their silo was challenged. And I think that if company leadership, myself included, had done a better job about creating a culture that valued information sharing, then that might have at least helped start to break down that silo. And who knows, maybe it wouldn't have broken down the silo entirely, or maybe it would have. But at the very least, I would say that we should have done a better job in not just looking at that one person and thinking about he built a silo around himself, but thinking about the whole company and trying to make it important to the whole company, this concept of sharing information, of working as a team, and not hoarding information.
Absolutely. I feel like a lot of folks think, hey, if I hoard this, it'll protect me. But in reality, it stunts their growth and it hurts them and it hurts the whole company. It makes it really hard to take a vacation, at the least, because, hey, you're the only one that knows how to push that button.
Oh, yeah.
But one of the concepts we stole from EOS is that delegate and elevate, and like really helping folks understand, hey, okay, here's like the 20 things you're doing. Which of these do you actually enjoy and you're like the best at and love? All right, let's try to get more and more of your time there. And then which of these things that just like are mind numbing for you that you want to like transfer to someone else? And so I think it helps folks really get in their unique ability spot, but it also helps with the resilience of the organization because you can get folks cross-trained on other folks, because what I hate, you might love. And so there now we already have two people that know how to do it. One of them's really excited to learn.
That's great. Well, to draw things to a close, I want to give you the opportunity to share any additional information on maybe a topic I didn't cover or a thread that I should have gone down. You don't have to say anything here, but at the very least, want to give you a few moments of open airtime, if you will.
No, I appreciate it. This has been great. I think something that I continue to remind myself, and some days it's a lot harder than others, but it's just to enjoy it. Like I have a almost 2 and some change year old, and I just had another baby like a couple weeks ago. And it's just crazy how quickly they're growing. And I think the same thing is going to happen with my career in this business. Like it's fun. We're having a great time, and I get stressed out because I get some bad news. I mean, it's just inevitable. That's just the world we live in. And try to, as much as possible, enjoy it. And when I don't, like take a reflection, a clarity break, we call it, just to get back to that point, because it's going to go by fast. And it's a lot more fun when you do it that way. You're probably more successful too.
I agree. The folks that I feel bad about in this world are the ones that hate their job, because think about how much of your life is spent working. And I'm sure you've been in a job that you've hated. And I have, of course, there's been a lot of jobs. And that period of time, the dislike in my job carried over into the time that I wasn't at work. So now it's not just the 8 to 5 that you're spending at the four walls of your company. It's even more than that. And so I agree. I'm not going to go so far as to say it's all about the journey. You shouldn't care about the destination. Both are important, but I am a firm believer that I want to enjoy the journey. I want to have a job that I enjoy doing, because if I don't, then I'm missing out on life.
Absolutely. And I think it resonates with your employees too. Like, hey, if you're not having a good time here, like I'm not holding you hostage. Like if you're coming in multiple days, you're coming in, you're parking your car in our parking lot and you're just not happy, like talk to me. We got to figure this out, because life's too short to work with jerks or to be unhappy in your day to day. I had that at a previous company. My boss at the time and I just didn't gel. And it was really difficult time here. I'm not saying I come home and I'm like all puppy dogs and butterflies. I still have like stressors at night, that come into my mind, but it's all within my control. And that was a big choice of why I chose this path.
And it's called work for a reason. It's not all fun and games, but just because it's called work doesn't mean you have to hate it, which is, what I think we're both trying to say there. So, John, really appreciate it. Think very highly of you. I know that Federal it already is successful. You've done a great job in your 5 years, I'm sure. And I can only imagine how much it's going to grow over the next years. And not only how much it's going to grow, but how many people are going to have an improved life and a more enjoyable work experience because of the culture that you've instilled there. So Thanks for being on the show, and thanks for all that you're doing at your company.
Absolutely, Nick. Well, thank you. It's very kind of you to say. I really appreciate the opportunity.
It was so great catching up with John and hearing his perspective on buying a company versus starting one from scratch. Federal Corporation, along with their subsidiary Federal Services, was already a successful business. But over the past 5 years, John has brought new life to a century-old company while respecting the knowledge and expertise of its current employees. Much of his effective leadership strategy has been about listening to them, seeing how things were done, and figuring out the best way forward. When it comes to Federal Corporation, John knows that being the best company isn't just about cutting costs to offer the lowest prices. He recognizes the value of caring about quality, employees, and customers. His strategy is a careful balance of affordability versus excellence, which makes Federal stand out as a company that takes care of its customers. Beyond John's careful considerations as a leader, what I'm taking away from my chat with him is this. If you're ever feeling like your business is moving too slowly, take a breath and don't just keep trying to rush the process. Let things unfold at their own pace. Embrace the lessons along the way and enjoy the journey. If you were inspired by this episode of Ambition, please share it with a friend or colleague. Thanks for listening.